Okay, so now that we've seen some examples of libraries and stuff, let's try to apply some of this and do something cool and useful with it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the random library, and we're going to make a little game where we create a random integer, and we're just going to ask the user to guess the random integer. And if they guess too high, we're going to tell them they guessed too high, and if they guess too low, we're going to tell them they guessed too low. And if they guessed right, we're going to tell them they got it. So let's begin. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to import random. And well, since we only need one thing from random, we need the randint function. We can actually go ahead and use from, the from keyword, and then so from random, we're going to import randint. So what we're doing here is we're accessing the random library, but from it, we're only importing the randint function. We're not importing anything else. And that's all we're going to use. And so if you forgot how the parameters of the randint function look like and what it does, so the randint function looks like this. We've got randint, open and close parentheses, and then a and b. And what this is going to give us, this is going to give us a random number that's greater than or equal to a. So n is going to be a random number, and it's less than or equal to b. And so what the randint does is it gives us a random integer between a and b. So what we're going to do is we'll just save our random integer in a variable. So let's just call it randval. So that's going to be our random value. And that's going to be equal to, and then we're going to call the randint function. And we're just going to create a random integer between 0 and 100, like this. So what we're doing is we're calling the randint function, and the lower bound is going to be 0, the upper bound is going to be 100, and we're going to get a number that may be 0, that may be 100, or it may be anything in between. And the reason we don't have to do any r dot or random dot or something here is because from this library, we've actually imported the function directly. And so we don't need to access the random library or anything because we've directly imported this. So this from import allows us to not have to access any of this because we didn't import the whole library. We just imported a special function. Okay, so how are we going to make our guessing game? Well, let's just make an infinite loop. And so this loop is going to stop once the user guesses the correct number. So to make an infinite loop, if we remember, we're going to use a while loop. And then we open and close parentheses. And inside here, we're going to put in true. So what this is checking, essentially, and so if we have our colon here, what this is checking, essentially, is this is while true is equal to true. So if we remember, this while true is a short form for this. And then we have our colon here too. But we don't need to write this because if we don't have anything here, this is kind of assumed. So for example, if we print a number, so if we print 1, and if we run this code, what we're going to get is we're just going to get 1 printed a bunch of times. So we see, well, we're getting spammed output. But so let's just stop this. But this is kind of what the while loop does, or while this while true does, is that it's an infinite loop that just repeats all the time. So as soon as all of this is done, it just repeats and it never ends. So if I scroll around here a little bit, you can see I got a bunch of 1s. But anyway, so yeah, this is just kind of a quick refresher if you don't really recall how to make an infinite loop or why it works the way it does. So yeah, so this is kind of the long version. It's checking while true is equal to true. And since they're always equal, it's always going to run. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a guess variable, and in it, we're going to take in user input, and this is going to be saved as our guess. So our guess is going to be equal to, and now we're going to ask for user input. So we're going to use the input, and then we open and close parentheses. And so we print to the user, please enter your guess. Guess, there we go. And we have a colon here for formatting and maybe a space too. And so what we're doing, we're asking the user to please enter their guess. And since everything that we get here is going to be in the form of a string, so inside of these quotation marks, we're going to cast it to an integer. So we're going to turn it into an integer, like this. So we're hopefully going to get a number here, and then if we get a number, we're going to turn it into an integer so that we can actually do something with it. We can do some comparisons and stuff. So what we get first is the word that contains the number, and then we're going to turn it into an integer. So yeah, so now we've got our guess, and now we have to check if our guess is in the right range, or if it's equal to the number. So let's check first if our guess is equal to the number. So if guess is equal to our rand val, so we remember we have the double equal sign here, and so this is comparison, and it checks if they have the same value. So if our guess is equal to the rand val, we're just gonna break. So we're gonna break out of this loop, and so what this break does is the loop that's in right now, it stops and we go out of it. So this is a nice way that we can just get out of this infinite loop. For example, we're just gonna break. So if they guessed the right number, we're gonna break. And so if they didn't guess the right number, what we're gonna do is, let's just check elif. And so what we're gonna see is, well, let's first check if our guess is lower than our number, or our random number. So if our guess is less than the random value, well, then we want to tell the user that their guess is too low. So we're going to print out, and then so we have the print here and the open and close quotation marks, and around that we have the open and close parentheses. So inside of these quotation marks we put in, your guess was too low. So your guess was too low. Too low. All right. So now that we've got that, what we're going to do is, so now we've checked if the guess is less than the random value. So if it's not less than the random value, so what we've did is we've checked if it's equal to the random value and if it's less than. And so if it's neither equal to nor less than, then we enter this else clause. So else, so that means it must be greater than. If it's not equal to and if it's not less, then it must be greater. So else, we're going to print out too high. So we're telling the user they guessed too high. So what we're doing is, what we made here is we've created a random integer here, between 0 and 100, including both 0 and 100. And we've saved that in the rand val variable. Then what we've done here is we've created an infinite loop using the while true. And so what that does is it checks while true is equal to true. And since true is always equal to true, this is just going to run indefinitely until we tell it to stop. And then we created a variable that's going to store our guess from the user. So our guess is going to be equal to. And now what we did is we asked for input from the user, so please enter your guess. And once they've entered their guess, we try to convert it to an integer. And then we check if the guess is equal to the random value, so if the user guessed the right random value. If they did, we break. Otherwise, if they guessed too low, we tell them the guess was too low. And otherwise, we tell them the guess was too high. And so maybe the last thing we want to do after this, so if they guess the right value, what's going to happen is this loop is going to stop. And we're going to continue. So let's just print out to them what the right number was. So let's just print out their guess to them again. So we can print out, you guessed correctly with, and so this is what we're going to print in the string, and then we can put the comma here, which also gives us the space for formatting, and then we can put in here the guess. So we don't have to convert this to a string because we're using the comma instead of the plus. If we were using the plus, we would have to turn the guess into an s, so we'd have to use the str around the guess. But right now it's fine like this because we've used this comma separator here. So what we're doing is if they guess the right value, then we're going to break out of this loop. So what this break does is everything else gets skipped like this, and we also go out of the loop. and it just continues on with the program. And so if we guess the right value, what it's going to do, it's just going to tell us you guessed correctly with, and then it tells us our guess again. So if we run our program, and then we just guess a little bit, so we can guess maybe 50, well, the guess was too low, so maybe let's guess 75, was too high, so let's guess 60, well, let's guess 62, so it's too low, so maybe let's try 69. We guessed correctly with 69. So that's cool. So now we found out what the random number was. And so what we did here is we built a little random number guessing game using the random library and just using some of the input and output too, as well as the while statements and if checking and breaking out of loops. So we've kind of combined everything we know to make a little fun guessing game that is different every time you play. So if we run it again, we're going to get a different number, so maybe we can just run it one more time, and I'll try to guess fast. So let's guess 50, it's too low. Let's guess 75, still too low. So let's guess, well, we can guess 88, now it's too high now. So let's guess 81 maybe, now it's too low. If we guess 84, still too low. Let's guess 86. So now we guessed correctly with 86. So we see here is 69, here we've got 86, so each time we run this, we're going to get a different number. Yeah, so this was a fun kind of cool little guessing game that we built using all the features that we know, and we just kind of expanded on what we know and invented, or, well, we didn't invent it, but we kind of created something cool, or we kind of replicated a cool little game. So this is one of those popular games that you can kind of find everywhere. But yeah, it's still cool. We kind of built our first little guessing game.